Why do recovering addicts use that word? Why do they use the word addict? My name's Ali and I'm an addict. That sort of thing. People recently seem to be under the idea that it's a negative affirmation or something like that, and it's unnecessary. That's not at all the reason recovering addicts use it. They use it as a reappropriation of the word, first and foremost. It destigmatizes it. So it's a bit like, it's not exactly the right analogy to use, but it's a little bit like the N-word. So the black community, obviously, famously, has reappropriated that word over the decades. It's their prerogative if they wish to use it, and when they do, it's usually done in a humorous or empowering way, right? So in some ways there's a similarity there. The word alcoholic or addict obviously used to have a lot of stigma, and now when it's used in a way of power that says affirmatively, I am an addict. Now why would you want to make that statement is another level of meaning. What the early recovering alcoholics were trying to do was create a state of remembrance or something like that, a state of seriousness around the disorder. It's an illness that encompasses a lot of forgetfulness and a lot of denial. Oh, I'm better now, I feel better, therefore I am better, I can go out and use again. And usually when we do that, it's a disaster. And the reason for that is addiction's driven by a huge loom of neural networks coming right up from the base of the brain, right through the midbrain, all the way to the prefrontal cortex. The brain's mesolimbic dopamine system is a powerful highway, really. And people who are addicted have significant memory and learning components of their addictive disorder. You know, a large part of the addictive illness is memory and learning based. So when you have already learned the diabolical methods of getting rewarded, like using crack cocaine, using heroin, things like that, you're not going to forget that those things are a panacea for all your problems, essentially, and you're off to the races again. So the word addict is almost used like a negative reminder of what you really are. It's an acceptance, really. It's a surrender. It's a surrender to the reality of your situation. I am an addict. And that sounds negative to outsiders, but when you're an insider and you've suffered at the hand of this beast that's both a part of you and not a part of you all at the same time, obviously it's our own brain that's tricking us. But as Freud said, one of the better ideas of Freud was that our mind is psychodynamic. In other words, it's dynamic. There's lots of moving parts to the brain, and they don't all work in concert. They don't all work in unison. Not all of your brain is prepared to work nicely with other bits of your brain. You know, we have different conflicting thoughts all the time. You know, somebody would like to be a good husband, and at the same time they're very attracted to somebody else, you know, and they've been pulled into two different directions. That's what addiction is. You know, obviously most addicts don't want to do the things they do, but the addict wins out. So when we talk about the addict in the third person like that, we also get a lot of criticism. People can't understand it. Why do you talk about it in the third person like it's not you? Well, because it kind of isn't. It is and it isn't. So there are a lot of peculiarities about the language that addicts, recovering addicts, use to describe their condition, which are counterintuitive and which the ordinaries don't understand, right? Because it's a very peculiar thing, but which recovering addicts do understand through lived experience. And they've found that it works to issue this constant reminder, this mantra, this identification system. And that's quite smart, because another component of the addictive illness, if you like, is the prefrontal cortex based identifying. When you've had your brain hijacked by crack cocaine or meth or fentanyl, one of the last bits of the illness that really takes you over and takes you out is again, part of the brain's mesolimbic dopamine system, is the way that new memories are formed with dopamine, and new friendship groups and denial systems and things like that that are controlled by the dopamine-driven learning processes that addiction demands. I identify with this group of other crackheads. I do not identify with my parents. These people are telling me drugs are dangerous, but I can get a free pass there. I can ignore that. I can deny that. All of these thought processes, cognitive thought processes, are learning based. They're identity based. So you come more and more and more to identify with the drug of choice, with the little golden nugget, as it were, and the people that do it. And you tell yourself all sorts of lies about why that's great and why all those people are fine and why all of these people over here that are remonstrating with you, trying to intervene on you and pull you out of the nightmare, you can partition them off. All of that is also a sort of dopamine-driven aspect of the illness, based around self-image, identity, memory and learning, basically. So remembering that you're an addict and boldly stating so, I am an addict, is part of, it's a sort of cognitive and identification strategy that we use to remind ourselves which group we belong to now. We're with the recovering addicts, not the active addicts. But I am an addict. And if I pick up again, I'm kind of doomed. Now, why abstinence is required in some people, addicts, and not in others, is probably the topic for another video. But I thought it'd be interesting just to break some of those urban myths about, is it really necessary to identify as an addict? It is, arguably, because addiction is driven by forgetfulness and by essentially forgetting that you're where you used to be.